All right, good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I was in the middle of a lesson and lost track of time. But yeah, if you got your questions, go ahead and post them. I'm just going to refill my drink here real quick. Go ahead and post them in the chat. If you're on a smaller screen, it'll be below the video. If you're on a larger screen, it'll be to the right of the video. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, looks like we got several questions in there to start with. All right, so we'll start here with Jamie says, I'm hitting my driver to the right by shallowing the club. I'm hitting more yards, but sometimes way to the right, not a slice. It just starts right. How can I solve that? So you're either swinging too far to the right, so you're over shallowing out the club, right? So you're just overdoing a good thing, or you need to get the club face to more closed, so that way the ball can draw back, right? Or a little bit of both, right? So strengthening the grip, he's strengthening the grip, and so here's what I would do first. One, I'd strengthen the grip, so get your lead hand more on top, trail hand more under, so that way you can more easily get the club face closed to get it to turn over. And then if it's, if you get it to draw back to the target, but it's just a ton of curve, then I would tone that down a little bit and I wouldn't swing so far to the right, right? Because you're just swinging too far to the right. You're over shallowing out the club if that's the case. Now, if you have the amount of curve, let's say your ball is starting way out to the right and it's drawing back a little bit, but not enough. So it has the amount of curve that you want on it, but it's still too far to the right. In that case, you're just swinging too far to the right, and you need to feel more swinging to the left to get it more on track. All right, so Joe M says, Q, last week in your office hours session, you described how to gain club head speed without sacrificing control, and the harder you press into the ground with the lead foot, the more power you can create. Would it be possible for you to demonstrate the relationship of opening the hips, that front foot pressure, and the snap of the downswing just before going into the finish? We struggle with that part of the swing. Thank you kindly. So as far as opening up the hips is concerned, it's not necessarily directly correlated, because if you actually look at a lot of long drive guys, these are the guys that hit the ball the farthest. A lot of them really aren't opening their hips that much, right? So it's not necessarily opening the hips, right? That's not necessarily the thing that's getting you more club head speed. It's the amount of force that you're putting into the ground, right? So that's really what it comes down to, is pushing into the ground, because you may not be able to, if you can't, you can only open up your hips so much depending on how much you can shallow out the club, right? So let's say you're only physically capable of shallowing out the club this much. Well, if I got my hips this open, look at how steep that club's going to come down. That's not going to work. That swing will not work. You can only do what you're physically capable of doing, right? So if I can only shallow out the club this much, then I can only get my hips open this much, right? Because if I open up my hips more, then I'm going to come down way steep, right? So you have to match up how much you're shallowing out the club with how much your hips are opening up. It doesn't really have anything. It doesn't have much to do with push, like the actual forces. Trying to explain this in a way that makes the most sense. As far as power and speed is concerned, it's way more about just pushing into the ground in general, and not necessarily ripping your body open, right? Getting the body to open up, because if you don't shallow out the club enough, none of that even matters. So what I would recommend doing is, as an experiment, what you can do is you can try to open up your body as much as you possibly can. So almost feel like you're hitting a pull with your lower body, but then with your upper body, feel like you're hitting a big push out to the right. So that would look something like this, right? So see how my hips are really open, but I'm swinging way out to the right with my body. It's almost like if you're bowling, right? If you're bowling, You're not going to bowl if I'm bowling this way, right? The lane is that way. I'm not going to bowl like that, right? I'm going to, if I'm bowling toward you, I'm going to bowl like this, right? So see how it's along the side of my body? So that's what I would try to feel like you're doing. I try to feel like you're swinging the club along the side of your body to get the body to open up. That's what I would try to feel. So Jeffrey L says, "What's going on, Quentin? Happy Monday. Just wanted to find out if you have any tips on how to keep stiff elbows." I'm not sure what you mean. How to keep stiff elbows? You want to keep your elbows stiff? I don't recommend trying to keep your elbows stiff. Like, so when you throw a ball, are you trying to keep your elbow stiff? No, of course not, right? You're being athletic and you're moving. So that's what I would try to feel like with the elbows, right? The lead elbow, it's like throwing a frisbee, right? There might be a little bit of bend in it as you get up to the top. Now, a lot of times that will kind of straighten out as you throw it out, right? Or, you may keep it kind of dead straight. That's fine too. But that's what's going on with the lead elbow. The trail elbow, it's like throwing a rock across the water, skipping a rock across the water. It's going to be fairly relaxed at address. It'll have a little bit of bend in it. So like if you're just standing here like this, your elbow is going to have some bend in it, right? And then when you go up to the top, it's going to fold to about 90 degrees. Then when you bring it down, it's going to start to straighten out until you release it out in front where it's going to totally straighten out, right? That's the motion of the elbow. It's not stiff, right? It's, you're moving it around. So Jim N says, curious how much and when the muscles of the wrist joint actively impact the lag cycle, creating lag through the release, versus when the wrist joints are passive and just hinging as a result of the physics of the club head. To me, either forcing lag creation or forcing the release, specifically the wrist muscles, seems more likely to cause a problem. So I feel my wrists are more passive, but not sure if that's correct. So here's the thing. You cannot be passive with your wrist. What you're talking about is a feel, right? It may be a feel. Now, if you're talking about feels, that's completely different things. But what's literally happening is you are absolutely not passive with your wrist muscles, with anything. They are working whether you realize it or not, right? And I can prove it to you, right? So try this experiment. Take your club, right, or have a long sleeve shirt, kind of like my pullover here, and take your arms out of it. Then tie it to your club. Now swing the club, right? It's not going to happen, is it? Right? You can attach it to the club and have your hands. You can try it. You may swing it a little bit, but you're not going to swing it much, right? And that's passive, right? If it was really passive, then if my arms are really passive in the swing, or if my wrists are really actually passive in the swing, then I should be able to do that easily, right? But that's not what's happening, right? You are absolutely actively using your wrists. Now, what you feel and what's actually happening can be two different things. But what's actually happening is you are absolutely using your wrist muscles in the swing. They are not literally passive. Okay, so you are definitely using them. The club isn't going to go up on its own, right? There's gravity here. I have to lift it up. I have to do this, right? Now, at some point, I do have to do that. Now, when you get up here, there might be some momentum, that creates some lag where the wrists aren't really doing much, right? But I have to get it there to begin with, right? And then as I'm bringing it down, right, I have to let that go, right? So the wrists are absolutely doing stuff in the swing, for sure. So Gordon A says, Q, do the hands, arms go to the right after impact to complete the swing? Do the hands, arms go to the right after impact to complete the swing? If you're left-handed, they would, but if you're right-handed, they're going to go to the left, right? So here, my arms are going to, unless I don't understand the question quite correctly. But here, my arms are going out to the right, out to the right, out to the right. Now about right in this area, right, when we look at the better players, typically around when the club head is, or when the shaft's parallel to the ground, that's when the hands are going to start, arms are going to start to move to the left, right, a little bit. So it's what you're asking, are the everything going to keep going out to the right? Nope. So as I bring that down, your arms are going to work around your body, right? So if I'm here, if my arms went out, continued to go out to the right, it would look like this, right? And that's not what's happening, right? I'm here, and then my arms are going to start to move to the left, right? As I'm coming through. If I'm not understanding your question correctly, let me know. All right, so Vahab A, apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, says, I tend to shank with my shorter clubs, usually when I'm tired. Is it over the top issue or something else? It could possibly be an over the top issue, but usually I can go over kind of the things that I typically see and that cause shanks, and kind of help you there. So one would be, if we were talking about the setup, maybe standing a little bit too close to the ball, possibly, right? So if I'm standing like this, right, I just don't have a lot of space for my hands and arms to work through. And maybe if it's a shorter club, you feel like you kind of have to crowd the ball a little bit more. And maybe that's what's going on. But if I'm standing like this, if I move my hips at all toward the ball, if I don't move my hips backwards away from it, I don't have any space for my hands to work through, right? And generally that's going to move your hands out close to the ball, which is going to move the club head out closer to the ball, right? So with your setup, what I would try to do is I let your arms relax, kind of like they're wet noodles hanging from your shoulder. Get a little bit of flex in the knees to where the your knee is just over the balls of your toes. So just a little bit of flex. It doesn't take much, just a little bit. And then what you're going to do is you're going to push your hips back and your chest forward, right? And I want you to make sure that you're staying balanced in your feet, right? So what I mean by that is if you push your hips back and your chest forward and you feel a ton of weight in your heels, when you're pushing your hips too far back and your chest not forward enough, right? And if you push your hips back and your chest forward and you get too much in your toes, right, then you're pushing your chest too far forward. So I would try to feel like you're staying very balanced in your toes. The pressure difference between your toes and your heels, or the balls of your feet and your heels, is the same, right? It's not you're not feeling more pressure in your toes, and you're not feeling more pressure in your heels. It's staying fairly balanced, right? So if I do that, relax my shoulders, relax my arms, a little bit of flex in the knees, push my hips back, my chest forward, I'm going to stop as soon as my hands, when they're nice and relaxed hanging here, get to about 5-6 inches in front of my thighs. From there, I'm going to grab the club. That's where I want to be. That's going to put you in a you can see here, I'm in a very nice, relaxed setup. I'm not standing too close. I'm not standing too far away. That doesn't mean that I can't be better like this or like this. There are players that stand a lot closer to the ball, John Rahm being one. There are players that stand farther from the ball, Bryson DeChambeau being another one, right? So it doesn't mean, but that's just a general area that I would look at, right? So standing too close, right? And I would say the number one cause of shanks is typically just the hips moving too much toward the ball, right? So when you're coming down, if you see your hips kind of moving, if you draw a line on your backside here and you see your hips moving a lot toward the ball, that could be the culprit there. So I would just try to feel like your hips are moving away. They're always moving away from the ball. This is a feel, not a reality, but I would try to feel like the hips are going to move away in the backswing. So I would literally feel like your swing is this, right? So I'm pushing my hips away from the ball. And then what that's going to do is that's going to create space for my hands to work through, so they're not moving out toward the golf ball. That's the number one thing that I see that causes shanks. Now, what you're talking about, coming over the top, can often cause shanks as well, because if I'm coming over the top, I'm typically also going to have an open face, right? And if I'm cutting across the ball, that makes the sweet spot of the club smaller. And with shorter clubs, the hosel is a little bit more protruding than the longer clubs, right? So, this is a wedge. If I'm cutting across the ball, right, this is let's say that you're the camera is the ball, right? And this is the club kind of coming at the ball, right? So you can see this big hosel here. There's not a lot of club face here to hit it on, right? I want to have I want to see, as if I'm a ball, I want to see this coming at me, right? I don't want to see this coming at me because that means I'm going to be getting hit off of here, or a good possibility, right? So if we can get the club shallowing, right, more from the inside with the club face more square to that arc, right, as opposed to this, right? If you're coming down, this club head is outside of your hands and the space is open, right? That could be the cause of the shanks there. So that could be, so working through the 20-minute shallowing fix would possibly be something that you may want to do to get that working a little bit better. But I would check your setup. I would check your hips, right? See if the hips are moving out toward the ball too much. And then I would check your, see if you're cutting across or not. 20-minute shallowing fix if you are. To get to the 20-minute shallowing fix, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix. All right, so Charlie says, hi, never logged in on this office hours before, so hi. Hey, Charlie, welcome. If you got a question, just feel free to ask. All right, so John C says, where I practice is all mats, no grass. How could this affect my ball striking on the course? Since hitting off of mats, you aren't taking a divot, and your club tends to bounce off the mat if you come in too steep. Yeah, so a lot of times, when you're hitting off of mats, you can be hitting these great looking shots. And when you go out to the course, the reality is that you may have been hitting behind the ball a little bit. A lot of times, especially if you're coming in, if your angle of attack is pretty flat, right? Meaning you're not chopping down, but you're coming in fairly level with the ball, you can actually hit a few inches behind the ball and it will feel really good on the face. Unless you just have a really great feel for it. Higher level players that have a lot of feel for understanding and know what's kind of going on with the face and stuff like that. They tend to be able to, be able to do that a little bit better, be able to detect that a little bit better. But some players, it is difficult to feel that, right? So if you are in that situation, there's a couple options I would recommend. So one, this is the option that you can probably do right away because you probably have this on your bag, is use a golf towel, place a golf towel on the mat, flat on the mat, about a club head width behind the ball. So your towel would kind of go right here, right? And what you can do is you can hit shots, and if you hit the towel, you know that you're hitting the ground behind the towel, right? You're hitting the ground behind the ball too much. A better option, this is the option that I would recommend, is the speed trap. So this is the speed trap board. It's basically a piece of plexiglass. It's probably about an 1/8 inch thick, something like that. And what you do is you place this puppy on the ground and you place again about a club head width in front of your ball there. And then if you come, the reason why I like this is that when I hit this, listen to the sound. I know it's a very obvious audible click sound. So I know right away. The towel can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to detect. Now, if you would like to pick up one of these, it also comes with these bumpers that I don't know if you can see these. This is Velcro right here, these black spots on here. And they come with little bumpers that create kind of a path for your club to work through. So if you're struggling with shallowing out the club, you could put one right here and here, and that would force your path to kind of work from the inside. Because if you didn't, you would smack those bumpers, right? So I like that. I like it for that. To be honest with you, I've never really used them, so I don't know how well they work. But I have used this on my mat in my garage to give me some good feedback on whether I'm chunking it or not, right? Or hitting it thin or something like that. So that's something I'd recommend. Now, if you want to pick up one of these, you can get it from our resources tab. If you go to our resources tab, we have a basically a list of all the things that we recommend. This is on there, so you can click that link and you can pick one of these up. Highly recommend. I think it's an awesome thing to have. You can also use it on regular grass, but I really like it off of mats. So that's what I would recommend doing. Other than that, I mean, that's kind of the only thing is like the ground contact. That's really the only thing that's really not gonna, you know, translate very well. You know, where you strike it on the face in your ball flight and all that, that's all going to be the same. Another option is the divot board. I like the divot board as well. This is more like working on things at home, you know, not going to the driving range, but you can use it at the driving range as well. But I like this more like having it at home and just kind of hitting shots on it at home. But yeah, so this shows exactly where you're hitting the ground in relation to the ball. It also tells you, you know, with your swing path, right? It gives you a decent indication there. So if I swing over the top, right, you know, that's big time over the top, but you can see how that's kind of angled that way. That's going to be an over the top. I'm swinging to the left too much. If I get to where it's like that, that's too much to the right, right? I want to have it kind of coming down and be kind of straightforward like that. It can also tell you if you're hitting it off the toe or the heel or not, right? If that's something that's difficult for you to feel or detect, right? So you can see if I come in here and let's say I hit one, I put this ball on this dot and I hit it off the heel, right? So I come in and I hit this ball off the dot and I hit it off the heel. But you can see how my divot is starting. It's way more, it's too far to the right. So that's telling me, okay, I hit that one off the heel. Let's say you come in and your divot kind of looks, so you can see this would be like a toe strike. I'm coming in and my divot's kind of like that, right? Well, look, this is way off the toe. I can clearly see it. So I would want to see where my divot is kind of equal, right, on each side. If I get a center face strike, it's going to look like that, right? So see how it's kind of equal on each side. That's going to be an indication of a center face strike. So this is also a valuable tool. You can also get this from our resources tab. You can find all the links to get that kind of stuff in there. All right, so let's keep going. So Vahab goes on to say straight arms at impact with some tilt, depending on the club, has improved my consistency and distance. Does this reduce compression? If so, what adjustment do I need? Yeah, so typically the trail arm is going to be a little bit softer, right? So if my arms are both straight at impact, then typically, you know, I'm going to release the club a little bit earlier, right? You know, I'm going to have a little bit of shaft lean here. Right? You can see there's a little bit there with both arms straight, but I'm going to tend to be kind of standing up out of it. When you look at better players, what you're going to see is a little bit more shaft lean. You're going to see this right arm kind of soften up. It's going to have a little bit of bend in it at impact, right? So it's going to be more like this, right? So working on the straight line release, you know, that might be an option to get that trail arm. You are losing a little bit of compression because you're adding loft to the face. And when you de-loft the face, that compresses the ball more. So getting that trail arm to be a little bit softer, you know, it's like when you're throwing a ball, right? If you're throwing a ball, skipping a rock across the water, when you get to this point, you're going to have some bend in the arm, then you're going to release it, right? So what you're doing is you're almost throwing that rock straight into the ground, right? So I try to feel like you're throwing that rock more out, more out in front. So John says, during the downswing, as I release the club, should I be thinking about squaring the club face to the target and hitting out at the target? Or am I counting on being lined up correctly and making a good swing and letting those things take care of my direction? I would say whatever works best for you, to be honest. I mean, either one can be helpful. I personally like to think about I like to be more target oriented, right? And I'm squaring myself up to the target because then your alignment doesn't have to be perfect, right? The alignment is just to help you to get, you know, like if we were robots and you just kind of adjusted us, right? And then you just pushed a button and then we just swung and that's, you know, we swung the same way every single time. That'd be one thing, right? But we're human, right? We're adaptable. So I would try to feel like, okay, I'm hitting at that target. How can I set up and align myself the best way to hit at that target? And that's how I would personally do it. Now, if you feel like, if you set up and if your alignment, you trust your alignment and you just kind of feel more, okay, I just need to swing in the direction of my feet and that works better for you. Who am I to say that that's wrong, right? I wouldn't. If that works better for you, I would say stick with it. But me personally, I like to think more target oriented. I like to think I want to make the ball go at that target, right? And if I set up right this way, I still want the ball to go in the direction of that target, right? Just because I'm set up this way doesn't mean I'm going to hit the ball that way, right? So, but everyone's a little bit different in that regard. So you do what works best for you. So Steve says, I have an SC200 swing radar similar to the PRGR. Would you expect the distance readings to show shorter when hitting balls in colder weather, like an actual distance on the course of a real shot in bad weather, or does cold, wet wind not affect the reading on the lower swing radars? Yeah, so in colder weather, your ball speed is probably going to be a little bit lower. Because the ball properties of the ball are going to be a little bit different. So yeah, the ball is going to, you will lose some distance in colder weather for sure. So Vahab says, just changed from an overlap grip to a 10 finger and noticed 10-fold control over my right wrist and release. Is there a drawback to this? Again, it's kind of an each their own kind of thing, right? If that works better for you, then by all means. I wouldn't search for reasons for it to be the wrong thing to do. Just if it works for you, then do it. There's lots of players that have 10-finger grips. Scott Piercy uses a 10-finger grip. Been a PGA veteran, making millions of dollars for a long time. So if that works better for you, then by all means. Generally, I think it's better for most golfers to have an overlap or what you said, overlap or interlock grip, because to me, and this is what works best for me, to me that allows my hands to work better together, right? But for you, you may find that it works better to have a 10-finger grip. So it's really to each their own on that. There's lots of ways to swing the golf club, folks. There's not one way that everyone has to do it, right? So what I would look at here's what I would say as far as like the one thing that you need, or the things that you need to do. Look at the things that every single really good golfer does, right? And that's really what the top speed golf system is, and the shallowing fix. Every single really good golfer is doing those things. Now, in the top speed golf system, we don't say you have to have a grip that is like this or overlap or interlock, because you can have a 10-finger. There are great players that have had different grips, and they've had variances of, like, Jordan Spieth's got an interlock grip, but he has like a finger that, like, I haven't looked at it super closely, but I've noticed, like, at the top of the swing, you'll see like a finger like poking out a lot of times, right? He's doing something different there. It obviously works really well for him, right? Now that grip may not work very well for you, right? A weak grip, a strong grip, a neutral grip, right? There are players throughout history, elite golfers that have had all those grips, right? And they can win major golf tournaments with that. So it's really about tinkering and finding what works best for you. I will say there are basically, I haven't seen any good players that hold the club like too much in their hands like this, right? And you don't really see that. They're almost all of them are holding it a little bit in their fingers, a little bit in their hand, right? A little bit of each. None of them are all in the fingers or all in the hand. You don't see that. So that would be kind of the grip thing that I know would be like, okay, yeah, everyone needs to be doing that. So that's what I'd be looking at, or what are the things that all the best players do, right? And then everything else is kind of like what works best for you. There's lots of ways to do it. Joe M says, hi Q, would it be possible for you to demo the extra force that you put into the ground and that catapult the club handle with the action of the lead leg in the contact and release of the swing? So there isn't really a way for me to demonstrate force, right? Because I don't have like a force plate to kind of show you. So unfortunately, I don't have a way to demonstrate like what you're asking me, because I don't have the tools and things that allow me to do that. But I can talk about like how kind of the legs work in the swing, and maybe that will help to, and how where we're moving the pressure throughout the swing. So at address, we're going to be about 50-50 pressure in the swing, right? Now, I can stand here, right, and you tell, you may not even be able to tell what the pressures are in my swing, right, or in my feet right now, right? Now, I will tell you, I have a lot more pressure in this foot right now than I do in that foot. But me just standing there, you would probably say, oh, 50-50, right? No, because I can, and also I can move it around, right? So I can't show you without an actual force plate. Hopefully that makes sense. So, but anyway, at address, what you're going to see most players about 50-50, right? When we start the backswing, that pressure is going to start into the trail foot, right? Our left leg is going to start flexing and the knee is going to start moving in. Our trail leg is going to start extending, right? So from this angle, it's going to look like this, right? So you can see how my left knee, my lead knee, is going to flex and move in, while my right knee kind of extends. From this angle, it'll look like this, right? Now, as far as the pressures in the feet, 50-50, I'm going to start moving pressure into my trail foot right away. This is about as far to my right side as I'm going to be in the swing, right? As far as pressure is concerned. From here to the top of the swing, I'm going to be about 50-50. I'm going to move to about 50-50. So about 50-50 here. I'm going to be about 75-80% in my trail foot here. And then as I get up to the top, I'm going to be about 50-50 again, right? Now, when I start my downswing, I'm going to continue to move my pressure into my lead foot, right? I'm also going to, with my lead leg, start bowing out my lead leg. My lead leg is already flexed. It's going to remain flexed and it's going to bow out. My trail leg is going to match the flex of my lead leg, right? So that's going to look like this. All right, so see how my lead leg remained flexed and bowed out, and then my trail leg flexed. If you look at it from this angle, right? So I flex the left knee in, right knee extends, right? And when I start my downswing, my left leg is going to bow out, and my right leg is going to match that flex by about lead arm parallel. From there, my left knee or my left leg is going to start to straighten out as I push my hip back and around. And again, my pressure is increasing in my lead foot as I do this. All right, so if I go up, I match the flex there. And then as I come into impact, right, my left leg is going to start to extend, right? It's not going to be fully straightened out. Typically, there are some players that fully straighten it out by this point, but most players still have some flex in it, and they don't really fully extend it until after the release, and then they come around to a full finish, and then almost all my pressure is on my lead foot at that point. Harold says, is it ever a good idea to have forward shaft lean at address? I would say if you have a strong grip, I would say it's almost required unless you're just more comfortable having it there. So think about this. I think this is the biggest reason why people struggle with over the top. This is just my opinion, but the biggest reason why I think people struggle with an over the top and coming down steep swing is because at address, it's much more comfortable to be in a position where that club is kind of straight in front of you, like symmetrical, right? You kind of look at this, it's pretty much symmetrical other than my right hand kind of being lower on the club, right? If I was like this, it would be almost dead symmetrical, right? But my right hand's a little bit lower on the club. So the club's almost straight up and down. My body's almost straight up and down. And when the club is straight up and down like this, it's typically easiest or most comfortable to have a weak grip, right? A grip where your lead hand's more on the side of the club, your trail hand's on the other side of the club, right? So if you imagine if I'm wearing a glove, the emblem of my glove is pointing straight toward the target, right? So this is a position that I see a lot of golfers in, right? The problem with this is that people go up to the top of the swing and they'll have a cupped or flat wrist at the top. And with a weak grip, that's not going to work because the face is going to be very open. And when the face is open, you're going to tend to come over the top. And also, when your body is more straight up and down like this, you're going to tend to come over the top, right? So I think the overwhelming majority of golfers are going to get much better just by having a stronger grip. And when you have a stronger grip, the shaft is going to tend to be more forward, right? So let me go like extreme strong grip, right? The complete opposite, where my lead hand is on top of the club. If you imagine if I'm wearing a glove, the emblem of the glove is pointing straight back at you, right? So that'd be like a super strong grip. And then I put my trail hand, it's under. This would be a really, really strong grip. This is like a Brendan Steele strong kind of grip, right? Well, if I get in that position and then I have that shaft kind of straight up and down again, this is wildly uncomfortable, right? I feel like my lead arm has tons of tension. My wrist is kind of like in a very uncomfortable position, my left wrist here. So for me, if I were to relax with this really strong grip, if I just relax and then address the ball, I'm just going to relax and get into a comfortable position. Look at how much more forward my shaft is, right? My handle is so much more forward. So I would say with a stronger grip, you almost have to have the shaft leaning forward at rest to be in a kind of more relaxed and athletic position that I like to see golfers in at rest. So yes, I recommend that you have a stronger. Now, if you have a weak grip and you go up to the top of the swing and you got some bow in your wrist like this, right? And you got that, you're controlling that club face all the way down. You look like a Victor Hovland, or John Rahm or something like that. Then that you're perfect. You're good to go. Nothing to worry about there. You're good to go. But if you have a weak grip and you come down steep and over the top, open face, you struggle with consistency, I would highly recommend that you work through the 20-minute shallowing fix and adopt a stronger grip just to make it so much easier on yourself, right? Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of getting used to, getting into a different address position. But to be honest with you, if you can't change your address position, then you're going to have a hard time changing anything in your swing, right? Because the address position is a static position, right? Mostly static. It means that what I mean is it's not a dynamic thing. Yeah, sure, you're moving around and waggling in your address, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this. You're not having to dynamically move things around to change it, right? All you're doing is just changing your grip and then being relaxed and then just being in the comfortable position, right? That's all it is. If you can't change that in your swing, it's very highly likely that you're going to be able to change anything in your swing, because that's going to be one of the easiest things to change in your swing, right? Is to change your grip. So that's the way I would kind of look at it. If you can't change that, you're going to have a hard time changing anything. So John says, thanks for the great reply to my question. Just get a little more insight. Do most pros think about the target through impact, or do they rely on alignment? I don't know for a fact, but if I had to guess, target. If I had to guess. Now, we do want to marry the two, right? So here's what I would say to that. Your alignment, I would use your alignment in your setup to set you up to be in the best position to make the best swing, right? So imagine if I'm trying to hit the ball straight toward this outlet, right? But then my alignment, for some reason, just got really, really open. And in my mind, to me, it feels square, right? It feels like I'm lining up to the target. But in reality, I'm setting up like this. Well, because I'm setting up like that, I may have a hard time getting this club to work down on a path that's going to allow me to hit the ball in the direction of that target. I'm going to tend to come over the top when I set up with my body aligned way to the left like that, or I'm going to tend to swing more to the left of my target because of my alignment, right? So there has to be some give and take there, right? So what I would here's kind of what I would recommend. This is what I do, and I'm not talking to Tiger Woods and Patrick Cantlay and Scotty Scheffler. I'm not talking to these guys. I have no idea what they're if they're target oriented or alignment oriented or what. If I had to guess, I would guess they're more target oriented, and then they keep their alignment in check at the same time. So they have their alignment. They're keeping an eye on their alignment to make sure that they're able to hit the ball in the direction of their target. So the way that I would do that is I would always put a club or an alignment stick on the ground whenever you're practicing at the range. So that way you have some target awareness. So that way, okay, I have this stick pointed at my target, right? And now my feet are lined up with my target. That's what I do, right? And if I ever, let's say I start kind of like I feel like I'm making good swings and then I look up and the ball is going way to the left. Well, I might check my alignment next time. And then a lot of times I'll realize, okay, I'm just aligning my body way to the left. So I may feel like I'm setting myself up to hit the ball in the direction that I want, but I'm actually setting myself up to make it more difficult. And that's why I'm tending to hit the ball in the wrong direction, right? So when I say I'm more target oriented, it doesn't mean that I'm abandoning my alignment. I'm still making sure that my alignment is target oriented, right? But it's not like I just make sure that my feet are set up and then I don't even think about the target and I just swing. I would say that tour players don't do that. There might be some that do, but I would imagine most of them don't, if not none of them, right? I would say the overwhelming majority, and this is just based on what I think, not what I know. I would say the overwhelming majority are thinking about the target and they're keeping their alignment in check by using, if you go to any PGA tournament, right? Go to any professional golf tournament, and you won't see too many golfers out there without some sort of alignment tool on the ground, right? So they're constantly keeping that in check all the time, right? So that's what I would kind of recommend doing, how I would go about it. So Joe says, Q, you mentioned that you have a hitting area in your garage. We're looking to do the same. Any suggestions, simulator, screen, net, etc.? I don't have a net or a simulator screen or anything like that. Basically, what I have is I have a mat in my garage that I bought off of Amazon, super cheap. I think it was like $150 mat. It's a 4x5, I think, kind of mat. And then what I do is I'll either hit wadded up pieces of paper or I will hit foam balls into a towel that's draped over a chair. That's what I do. So that's probably not what you had in mind. I don't know what the best simulators are out there. I don't know what the best screens or anything, or what the best mats are. It's just not my. There are people out there that are experts in that, and they review all that stuff. I mean, I just go on YouTube, and you can probably find tons and tons of videos of people that are, reviewing all the simulators and all the screens and all the mats and all that stuff. That's not something that I've ever done. I know that at the office, the studio where we shoot the videos, that screen, or excuse me, I don't know what the screen is, but I know that the mat is the I believe it's the Country Club Elite. It's called. I think it's made by All Turf Mats or something like that. I believe so. I know it's called Country Club Elite. So if you just do a Google search of Country Club Elite mats, you'll find that, and it's held up. I mean, the mat that I have that's on Amazon, I don't know. I'm guessing it's some sort of like overseas, brand of some sort, that was made super cheap. But I don't use it a ton. I just use it every now and then when I hit balls. So, if you plan on hitting balls on it every single day, you may want to, spend probably $500 on a mat. And that's what that Country Club Elite is. It's about a $500 mat, $600 mat, maybe something like that. So that's what I'd recommend, because that one at the office it's been hit a lot. I've hit more on the one at the office, honestly, than the one we have here. So that would kind of be what I would recommend going with if you plan on putting a lot of use into it. So Dan says, Q, I'm changing my grip a little to be more on side to help shaft lean and getting club square impact. Can you show close up how to move thumb on side is crease of right palm still covering left thumb. Yes. So you're just doing the same thing. You're just taking the hands. You're shifting both of them, right? So let me just talk about the grip in general. The grip should go through the bottom, so the bottom of your pointer and then above your pinky. So it'd be like that, right? That's how the club should go through your hand, right? So you can see how that's a little bit in the fingers, it's a little bit in my hand, right? Now I wrap my hand around there. Now, if I have a weak grip, my thumb's going to be going pretty much down the top of the shaft, right? That would be kind of a weaker grip. If I have a stronger grip, it's still going to go on there the same way. It's just that my thumb's going to be more on the side of the shaft, right? And then I want to have my thumb pretty close to my hand. I don't want to hold it like this, right? Where I have a big gap here, and because that's going to make the club kind of move around. So I want to have it's like if I'm handing you something, if I'm handing you a pen, right? That's how I'm holding it. I'm holding it like that, right? And then it's going through my hand like that, right? So if I were to take these three fingers off the club, I could support the club pretty easily because it's below the heel pad of my hand there, right? Now, as far as how my trail hand goes on there, again, I don't want to have a huge gap here. It doesn't have to be dead close. I don't want to have it on there like this, right? It either needs to be, there can be a little bit of a gap there, or it can be really close. But if you look at your heel pad here and your thumb pad, if you squeeze those together, that's going to create a crease. That's either going to go on top of your lead thumb or on the side of. Here's how you know which to do. If you have trouble getting the club face closed, meaning you tend to, which it sounds like that's kind of where you're at, you have trouble getting the club face closed, I would put that crease more on the side of your thumb. If you're someone who tends to leave the face too closed, right, you get too close, and putting it more on top, kind of like Rory McIlroy, he puts it a little bit more on top. That's totally fine to do as long as you're getting the club face closed without really releasing it, right? So I tend to put it more on the side because that's a little bit easier to do. So Nigel said, just played 4.5 rounds in 6 days. And by the end of the inside of my right forearm near the elbow was very sore and hurt on impact. 2 days later now, there is bruising. Are there any good exercises to strengthen this area of my arm? Sorry, Nigel, that's not really my area of expertise. That doesn't sound normal to have bruising on the inside of your arm. That might be something to talk to your maybe your doctor or your physician about. But yeah, the exercises and stuff like that. Sorry, it's not my area of expertise. My area is within the golf swing itself. So Joe says, Mareem M. Hi Q. Do you have any suggestion how I can get my hips turning better? I have had 2 hip replacements in revision, so a little limited in turning. Yeah, so you can only do what you're physically capable of doing. Again, I don't know. Basically, so if you want to get your hips open, you have to shallow out the club. That's typically the number one thing I see people who are trying to get their hips open. They're coming down steep, right? So if I'm someone who comes into impact and I'm like this, my hips aren't open, right? And I'm coming down steep. Well, if I open up my hips, I'm just going to come down even steeper, right? So if you want to get the hips open, you have to make sure that you're shallowing out the club. You have to get that club more behind you, because otherwise you have zero incentive to open up the hips, right? I would much rather have the golfer that doesn't open up their hips, but gets the club to work down on plane, and shallow coming into the ball, than to have the golfer that opens up their hips but comes down way over the top, because that golfer is going to be a higher handicap golfer. The golfer that gets that club coming down on plane has the potential to hit shots in the direction of the target, right? Much more consistently. So if you want to get the hips open, you have to get the club shallowing out first. Otherwise, you have zero incentive to get the hips to open up, right? So that's what I would make sure that I would try to get the club too shallow, so that way you have an incentive to open up the body, right? Now, if you're coming in and you're like this, the club's too shallow and you're still coming in like that, then I would look at, okay, how do I start the downswing? Well, the way I would start the downswing, I talked about how the legs work earlier in the office hours. We want to get that lead leg kind of bowing out, right? So I'm at the top, it's flexed and moved in. Now I want to bow it out to start the downswing and keep it flexed. What I find a lot of people do is when they start their downswing, they straighten out the legs right away. When we start the downswing, we want to flex the hips and we want to flex the knees, right? We want to keep that lead knee flexed. It's already flexed at the top. We want to keep it flexed to start the downswing, and then we straighten it out through contact. That starts the rotation and then finishes the rotation. If you start the downswing by straightening out your legs, you have nothing else left to keep the body rotating other than the momentum of your arms and the club, right? But by that time, everything's already by you, right? You're already kind of like this, right? So if you want to use the legs to get the body opening up more, you have to flex the knees and the legs. Now, like I said, you can only do what you're physically capable of doing. So if you're not physically capable of doing that, then you're probably not going to be able to get your hips open. But that's okay. You don't have to get. I think people obsess about some things in the swing. Not saying you are, Joe, but I think people obsess about things in the swing a little bit too much, like getting the hips open, like getting shaft lean, or getting like Dustin Johnson like shaft lean. If you have any amount of shaft lean, you are fine. You don't have to have the hips open at impact to play good golf. There's lots of great golfers that don't. Brooks Koepka doesn't have his hips open very much. Plays great golf, right? So yeah, just some things to think about. John says, Q, do you recommend some degree of shaft lean for all clubs, long fairway clubs, and driver? So you're talking about at impact. So at impact, we have to have some amount of shaft lean in order to be a good ball striker. With the driver, you actually don't have to have shaft lean because the ball is not on the ground, right? For any shot that you're hitting off the ground, you have to have some amount of shaft lean because otherwise the club's going to bottom out before the ball, right? But for the driver, you don't need to have shaft lean. It's not a requirement. Generally, when you look at most tour players, they're going to have maybe 1 or 2 degrees of shaft lean. There are some players that have a lot, like Dustin Johnson, John Rahm. They both have quite a bit of shaft lean at impact, but they also play higher degree drivers. They play like 11, 12 degree drivers because of that. Because if they played like an 8-degree driver, they would just hit it way too low. So yeah, with the driver, we don't have to have shaft lean at contact. But we also, you need to be pretty close to it, right? So if you're coming in, you're like this with your driver where the shaft's leaning way back, you're going to tend to hit it low on the face. You're going to tend to probably have the face too close probably as well. Not always, but generally that's what's going to happen. So generally with the driver impact, you're going to have none to you can have it angled away slightly, but not a ton, not too much. All right, we got about 5 or 4 minutes left here. If we have any more questions. So John says, how about the position and address for those long clubs and driver? As I mentioned before, if you have a stronger grip, you're going to tend to have a little bit more shaft lean address. But to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter that much. Address doesn't matter if you have the shaft leaning forward or not. Just put it in whatever position allows you to get in the better position at impact. Impact is the only thing that matters, right? Everything else is just to set you up for the impact. So if having the shaft straight up and down at address helps you to get to a better impact position, then do that. If having the shaft leaning forward a lot helps you to have a better impact position, then do that, right? So that's really what it comes down to. As I mentioned before, If you have a stronger grip, you're going to tend to be more comfortable with the hands more forward at address. Now with the driver, because the ball position is more forward, you may not have the shaft leaning forward as much at address. In fact, it may be leaning backwards. So I wouldn't get too caught up in where it is at address. I would focus more on what's happening at impact. So Vahab says, have you had any experience with the Kirkland brand golf balls? Not a ton. I think I've tried a couple of them. I know the original ones that came out were pretty good, but I think they've had to change it. I don't know all the details, but I think they were getting sued or something like that. So I don't think the ones that they sell now are the same as the original ones. So I don't think that the ones that they sell now are quite as good as the original ones. But yeah, I don't have extensive use with them. I don't remember what the price is, but last I knew, I feel like it was like I think you got like I want to say like 30 golf balls for, I can't remember how much it was. It was pretty cheap. So I mean, it's a pretty decent golf ball for cheap. So seems like a pretty good deal. So Charlie says some good info on here. Enjoyed it. Thanks. No problem. Glad to help. All right. So Dan says transition to 9 o'clock feels good for space. When I bend up to top, not sure I'm doing that efficiently. Can you comment? Transition to 9 o'clock feels good for space. When I bend up to top, not sure I'm doing that efficiently. Can you comment? It's hard for me to say, Dan, without seeing your swing. So transition to 9 o'clock. So you're saying transition to 9 o'clock. Yeah, you're going to flex the knees and flex the hips to that position. And then from there, you're going to straighten out the lead leg and extend the hips through contact. So what you could do is you can draw a line. You can video your swing, draw a line on your backside. And then if you're moving your hips away from that line, you're probably not flexing long enough or, staying down and through it. But you could also be, throwing out the club, because a lot of times people come out of their posture because the face is open or because the club's coming down steep. It's not because of something they're doing with their posture. It's because they're not staying in their posture because they're not incentivized to do so, right? So if I have this club coming down steep, if I were to stay in my posture, I'm just going to come down even more steep, right? So if I have this club coming down steep and then I go like that, well, now I can actually get the club to shallow out, right? And now I can hit a functional shot toward the target. So those are all things you have to consider. John says, thanks, Q. I learned a lot out of these sessions. No problem, John. Glad to help. All right, 6 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. I got to go. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Have a good one.